You ever feel like you're in over your head in a project? That's exactly how I feel with this stainless 16 build. In this video, we're going to be welding the tubes so that they can't spin in the housing, and I get this crazy idea that my Super Duty 60 needs to be about 4 inches shorter than it is right now. So, this is what a stripped Super Duty Dana 60 looks like. As you might be aware, this is an 05 Plus Super Duty. They have a bunch of radius arm brackets, some of which are cast into the pumpkin. All that had to be removed, and then what you end up with is a pretty bare Dana 60. A lot of people with a lot more experience than me have gone over the process you need to follow when welding to cast, so I'm not going to make this a detailed video in that perspective. I'm going to go check out someone who's got more experience at it if you really want to know all the finer points. But basically, what I'm following here is you need to heat the cast up to between 450 and 500 degrees, and then you need to weld as hot as you can, and then you need to make sure that it cools down as slowly as possible. I had bought this weed burner and temperature probe on Amazon to get the heating job done. I'll put links in the description of this video. I also attempted to do some stick welding on this because everybody recommended using these nickel rods you use in a stick welder. I'm apparently very, very bad at stick welding, and when I tried to make this work on the axle, it just ended in tears. So I had to clean all that up, and then I ended up just using my gas MIG welder. All the welds appear to have come out pretty solid. I've talked to a bunch of folks who have done this before me, people that I trust, and they say that they don't bother using the sticks anymore. They just use it MIG and follow the heat and cooling process. And basically what I did was, after heating and welding, I wrapped whatever part it was that I welded in my welding blanket, and then wrapped my denim jacket that I use as a welding coat around the outside of that as well. And then I let it sit overnight. Now, the next really big part of this project was removing the passenger side C, because my goal was to knock off the C and then cut exactly 4 inches off of the tube and then get the C back on. First, I tried grinding away at the welds. As you can see here, I ground down the welds. I had them as gone as they could be, and I still couldn't knock the thing off. I tried heating up the C and then trying to knock it off then, and it still wouldn't budge. So what I ended up doing was taking the portaband and cutting just inside of the C. Now, this got pretty darn close. Maybe I was lucky, maybe I'm skilled, I don't know, but I got it off pretty straight. Once that was off, I had to get the leftover tube out of the inside of the C. So I managed to get that C free of the piece of tube that was inside of it. I'll go over that in a minute. But what I'm trying to do now is figure out how to get the right amount cut off of the end of this tube. And I want about 2 inches off, maybe. If I do 2 inches, there were 2 inches in the C, and if I take 2 more inches off, then the whole thing will be 4 inches narrower. I think that's the right number. I'm really going back and forth as to whether I want to cut 2 inches or 1 inch off of here. But if I go 2 inches, it takes me to like here. If I go 1 inch, the tube's still kind of boogered up, but I could make that work. I don't know, I think I'll do 2 inches. But what I want to do is come up with a way to make a nice line. I had this enormous pipe cutter somewhere, which I thought would have been great. Stand this up on one end, zing the pipe cutter around it a few times to make me a nice bright metal line. I can't find the stupid thing. I don't know where the hell I have it. Isn't that how it always goes? Anyway, so what I'm going to do is measure in 2 inches. Then I'm going to put this zip tie, 2 zip ties, because one of them's too short, around the tube, and then I'll just move the zip tie in and out to get exactly 2 inches from the end. And then I should be able to use the portaband to cut through. didn't get cut straight as I wanted it to be. I can probably fix that by cutting from the other end. So I got like a whole bunch of stuff done, and I got some footage of me doing it, but I didn't really tell you what's going on. First, I did, of course, manage to get the bits of tube out of the C. This is what was inside the C. This is one piece of it. Here's the rest of it. Got in there with a Sawzall and cut it into sections, and then it still wouldn't come out, and that's because there was still, I think at this end, there was still residuals of the weld that held it to the tube, holding it to the C. So I ended up getting in there with a Dremel, a cutoff wheel on a Dremel, and I made like a valley in between the C and the tube, and then between an air hammer and my chisels, I was able to get these pieces out, which really sucked. Here you can see one of the scores. It didn't get all the way through there. I don't know how well it's going to come through on the camera. But once I got those out, I went inside with a Dremel with like a sanding wheel on it and a sanding cylinder, and I cleaned the inside really well so there was no burrs and crap in there, being careful not to remove much material. It was basically getting off the surface, you know, the grime on the surface, and that was it. Did the same thing to the axle tube using a flap disc, and then using my, I already put it away, that finger sander. Then once I also chamfered the edge of the tube just a little. Maybe that's not the best way to go, but just enough that I was able to get the C kind of like on 1/4 of an inch, not even, so that I could line it up, right? Once I was sure that was all fitting, because this tube and the C are actually such a tight fit that I think at the factory they're probably either pressed on or they're heated and placed. I'm not sure. But I was trying to figure out how the heck do I get the C back on. Did some research, talked to a buddy of mine who's done these sort of things. He said he's had his best luck by heating up the C, and I found a video doing the exact same thing. You heat up the C to like a ridiculous temperature. The temperature was something like, I think I went to almost 700 degrees. Then, when I went to place it back on, I wore my thick welding gloves, these guys, which now, I mean, the fingers are deformed. That's how hot they were. Because these aren't, I guess they're not made for being long-term. Anyway, I was able to get it back on there. I took my angle finder, which is, I think, put away already, and I put this piece of scrap steel in between the angle finder and the C, so that the heat of the C didn't melt my angle finder, and it's still along the back of this step that's on here for where the ball joint mounts. That still melted the back corner of my angle finder, so that was really hot. Anyway, I checked for between the one I didn't touch, the C I didn't touch, and the C I was putting back on. even though it was really difficult to get a measurement without damaging my angle finder, I was able to get it within ½ degree. So this is like ½ degree off from the other one. Not even ½ degree, it's less than half. Hopefully that's not going to bite me later. I have no idea how precise this has to be. I'm hoping that that's okay. Again, the other thing is, this is primarily an off-road rig. So if that would have caused like weird tire wear or whatever, I'm probably not going to notice it. This is probably hardly going to be driven on the road at all. But I still wanted to get it as good as I can, because you never know, right? Are you going to drive it on the street? Who knows? Maybe someday I'll move to a state where I can actually drive my rig that doesn't have full tire coverage and is on tons on the street. It doesn't feel likely, but I also don't want to shoot myself in the foot later. Anyway, this is all a big learning curve for me. Maybe this will lead to me building other axles someday in the future. So far, I am pleased with how well this is going. The next step, of course, was to reattach it, actually weld it back into place. So what I did there, I'm not sure what the right way to do this is, but basically once I put it on there, it started to transfer heat from the C into the tube, and it pretty quickly got the tube up to a decent temperature and the C down to a lower temperature. It was around 250 degrees, and it wasn't moving. It was pretty tight, so I decided let's heat it back up to 450 or a little above 450 and get it welded on. So I heated the whole thing back up again, including the tube. Got some tacks on there so I'm sure it wouldn't move, and then I welded around the whole outside of the C in about 2 to 3 inch sections at a time, alternating sides, so that it wouldn't get all, so it wouldn't move from the heat of the weld. And then I wrapped it all up again and let it cool off. Now you might wonder, why the heck did I narrow this thing? Part of it is just personal preference, and part of it is because of trailer clearances. So my trailer has an 80-inch clearance between the fenders. Now, yes, I could drive over the fenders, but the rear axle that I have is 66.5 inches wide. The Ford Super Duty Dana 60 is 72 inches wide. A lot of folks have told me that the front axle should be slightly wider than the rear, but 5.5 inches wider seemed like a bit much to me. I thought it's not going to hurt anything if I narrow it a bit. I personally don't love the look of a ridiculously wide Jeep. I kind of like my LJ because it's narrow, but I also want the strength in tons. And if I want the size of this large axle and the size tires that are going to go along with it, I need enough turning radius in the front that it's going to clear the frame. So I thought a happy medium was to go wider, but not ridiculous wider, which is why I narrowed it just a bit. Obviously, your preferences may be different. Maybe you want it as wide as it can go. Maybe you want as much stability as you can. I have sacrificed probably a little bit of stability by doing this. The other thing that's going to be tricky is the truss that I bought. I have a Barnes 4-wheel drive swap truss that's supposed to go under the TJ, and now it's not going to fit my axle anymore. So I'm going to have to make some calls as to whether I modify the truss or I ditch the truss or sell the truss and go with some other solution for mounting the axle in the Jeep. Now, I could just buy coil buckets, or I could go coilovers and buy a bunch of brackets and do it that way, but what I really want is the strength of a truss. So if I'm going to need a truss anyway, I might as well take the truss I have and make it work. I have some ideas on how to get that to happen. Maybe I'll make another video on that. Alright, so I hope you guys have enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more content like this, please make sure to let me know. Hit that like button if you liked the content, and remember folks, get out there and wheel. I'll catch you in the next one.